Hello and welcome to PSG Review, the show that's been meandering through the international break. You know, I've been trying my hardest to avoid any and every possible injury so that at least I will be good and ready when the club football is back this weekend. Our players, they have been less lucky. Well, some of them, but fingers crossed it's not too bad in the end.
You are listening to PSG Review. Here's your host, Mikko.
I feel fairly ambivalent about the international breaks as they are, because I do like international football and there's been a lot of it this summer, but at the same time, it is a bit much at this point, so early in the season, and it's always the injuries that come. They seem as inevitable, as inescapable as difficult Champions League draws for Paris Saint-Germain. A little later in the show today we talk about how our women's team drew Juventus for their qualification round in this season Champions League. Not an easy opponent, but more of that a little bit later. The injuries, that is what I'm talking about. 3 PSG players took hits during this break, and it seems that Desiree Doué and Vitinha should be fairly okay to play, but Warren Emery, who featured at Parc des Princes for Les Bleus, could miss the matches against Brest and even Girona, also in the Champions League. Coming quite soon. This remains to be seen how it goes, but he took a hit on his left calf muscle and is not looking great when it comes to taking part in those matches. Very frustrating. Also quite frightening, to be honest with you, because we have some huge European matches ahead of us, and at any point we can lose a key player. I mean, it already happened even without an international break with Gonzalo Ramos, but it could happen to any other player also, and it could be a problem depending on the player. It really could be a problem, and of course it can be a problem also to our opponents. The same applies to them, because Arsenal's Martin Odegaard suffered an injury that could keep him away from the pitch for 3 weeks, which would make his availability against us on 1st of October unlikely. That is according to the current information, which of course can change at any time, but he took quite a knock, and it seems unlikely that he is ready when it's time for us to go to London to play against Arsenal. The international break itself on club level and individual level has been very good for our players if we look away from those knocks and injuries, as frustrating as they may have been. Let's start with France. 2 matches and 3 goals for France. Victory and defeat, but the only scorers were familiar names to us: Bradley Barcola, Randal Kolo Muani and Ousmane Dembele. No players from other clubs scored 1 goal for France. It was exclusively PSG players who were scoring during this international break. I mean, admittedly, it was hardly a goal festival, 3 goals, but nevertheless, all of our players who were there, except Warren Emery, scored a goal. So that's pretty special. And what is special, really, is Barcola. You have to give him a special mention, because he scored in the first match after just 13 seconds of play. This was against Italy. I mean, it's a quick goal, no matter how you look at it. There's no doubt about that. But France didn't actually start with the ball. To me, that's the mind-blowing part about it, is that it was Italy who had the ball, and Barcola gained the possession by stealing it around 9 seconds, and a very brief wink of an eye later, it was in the goal at Parc des Princes behind Gianluigi Donnarumma. In all fairness, Italy, of course, won the match. They were quite good. France is not very exciting team to watch at the moment, but it was a lovely goal for young Bradley. Well done to him. Genuinely very happy for him. He's a joy to watch, but of course we must also be very mindful of how much pressure we put on his shoulders right now. I mean, he seems very balanced and clear-minded guy, but nevertheless, we should just allow his season to unfold as it will, rather than start setting some huge expectations on him. He does look very balanced individual, like said, but nevertheless, I think it's best to let him be and let him do his thing. Fabian Ruiz, he scored a few goals for Spain. He's been very good for his national team, of course, last summer, the European champion and all that. Nuno Mendes provide a couple of assists, and he's becoming really one of the key players for pretty star-studded Portugal national team. So he got 2 assists. I think both of them were for Cristiano Ronaldo. Not bad at all for him. Also a beautiful goal for Desiree Doué for the French youth side before he was substituted off after his knock that he received, but like mentioned before, it wasn't anything too bad. This is what they were saying. We assume he's ready to play for PSG as soon as this weekend, or certainly so we have been informed. There's various amounts of minutes that have been played by our players, and today we focus a little bit on the amount of football that is being asked from these players on an annual level in general, and the impact that has. During this break, 6 of our players played every minute of 2 matches, 180 minutes. Those players were Marquinhos, William Baccio, Nuno Mendes, that is Donnarumma, Skriniar and Hakimi. Basically every available defensive player except Beraldo, who didn't play at all, even though he did make the journey to South America. Not much behind them is Lee Kang-in. Of course, he played 179 minutes, so practically 180 more or less, almost. So essentially, he's, of course, part of the same category of the players who played the whole 2 matches. Fabian Ruiz played 157 minutes. Vitinha played 1 match, so 90 minutes, and he got injured. João Neves played 67 minutes. Bradley Barcola 113 minutes. Dembele 2 minutes less, that was 111. Desiree Doué played 1 full match. Also, Kolomuani 67 minutes, just over an hour, and Pierre Emery had only 13 minutes, but he's out for a bit now. It's a lot of football, and it all adds up to an accumulated, well, too much, to be quite blunt, too much football. These international matches, they're right. I must admit that I had so much stuff on my to-do list that I kind of decided to skip these for the most part. I did watch a few of the matches during the international break, but not really all that much. And this Nations League that we have here in Europe, it doesn't really quite cut it for me, I have to say. I don't feel like it's been really able to justify its own existence. It's just sort of like another competition that was invented a couple of years ago, and now these international breaks we're playing these matches as supposedly they mean something that maybe they don't. But then again, every competition has just been started from nothing at some point, and now they mean something or they don't. But this is the problem. I think that we need to ask from, say, Nations League, why it is needed in a world where you already have these countries, these national teams on this continent. I also live in this continent. They're playing in the Euros, they're playing in the Euro qualifiers, and they're playing in the World Cup qualifiers. So what then is the urgency to have yet another thing under which they compete? The same countries, just a different trophy, and it's a new trophy, so there's not really historical significance to any of it at the moment, certainly. I don't know if I have ever told you about my proposal. I mean, I'm not really in a position to propose anything that much that anybody would listen to it or take it seriously, but I have this idea. I know I've been talking about it online. I can't quite remember if I mentioned it ever here on PSG Review, but if you want an exciting competition for European national teams for these international breaks or whatever, I would say that have regional tournaments. Divide the continent up to sensible groups and let them play against each other to see who is the best in that region. I mean, I can only imagine the atmosphere in the Balkan Cup when the countries in that area would be playing against each other. You see who is the best in that part of the continent. The level of football in the Mediterranean Cup, where you would have Italy and Spain and whatever else, that could be something else there in the Southern Europe. Then you have the Central Europe, Eastern Europe. However you would divvy up the whole continent, that's another matter. But I think that it could be something quite special, and for me especially, because this is where I am in. I think that the Nordic countries, that could genuinely be very interesting and exciting competition. I don't even mind if my own country, Finland, would be far from being a favorite against Sweden, Denmark, or even Norway, or even Iceland, to be honest with you. But I would like that competition to take place. I think that would be far more exciting competition than what we currently have. It's just sort of repeating itself over and over and again. And it would be much more engaging, these matches, that to play this Nations League. And now we even played against England. My national team, my home national team, played against England. So it's not like there's not a good matches. It's not like it's always the same. There's, but it's not that all exciting to me, I have to say. All in all, I could take it or leave it, this whole Nations League. In a blink of an eye, I don't feel any attachment to it. I think it would be much more exciting to have something else. It actually feels a little bit like this whole Club World Cup, which is now happening next year. Just an extra bit of matches for the players to play. La Fédération Internationale des Associations de Footballeurs Professionnels. I can only apologize for my still bit clunky pronunciation in French. You'll be pleased to know I'm working on it, but that is the organization that is often better known as FIFPro. In English, it's called International Federation of Professional Footballers, a sort of players association, a union, whatever you want to call it. It has 65,000 professional footballers as its members, and it has smaller national associations under it as a sort of umbrella thing. For us who follow French football, we talk of UNFP. You might have heard the acronym at least from the end of the year awards, who is the UNFP best player in Ligue 1 and so on and so forth. Well, the global union, FIFPro, does this major survey annually that is called Player Workload Monitoring, or PWM report, which highlights the burden on players involved in these multiple international tournaments and competitions, and how those collectively compromise their welfare, performance, and even career prospects. The latest report was published recently, and it's fairly alarming reading. Some players are seeing their time off fall to as little as 12% of the calendar year, which is equivalent to less than one full day off per week. That is also contravening the international occupational safety and health standards amid a lack of appreciation by competition organizers of their welfare, the players' welfare, and an absence of coordinated calendar planning. That is what they're saying. Essentially, that is to say, without spelling it all out, that the business that is football is keen on adding dates and especially matches to televise. That's at the center of this. Matches to televise without much care in the world how this will impact the players, their health and their performance, even, in a short run, but also in a long run. How will it impact their whole careers? It's quite a bit, to go through a year, the whole calendar year, with under 1 day off in a week. The report also reveals, and I quote, 54% of 1,500 players that were being especially monitored in this report faced excessive or high workload demands, with significant number exceeding the recommended limits by medical expert. Specifically, almost third, that is 31% of players were included in matchday squads for 55 or more games, while 1 in 6, that is sort of 17%, made over 55 appearances. Almost third, which is 30% in this case, of the players endured sequences of at least 6 consecutive weeks of back-to-back games, 2 games or more per week. Okay, I think that's enough of directly quoting from this report. But basically, these matches that are happening, and there's a lot of them, but they're divided quite unevenly among the various players in the world. If you are playing most minutes and you are a starter for a club like ours, like PSG, you'll find yourself playing domestic season with Coupe de France and Ligue 1 included. You play in the Champions League, which also includes more traveling, and then you fly to your international breaks. And some players, especially in South America, but also someone like Lee Kang-in in South Korea, have very long flights, several time zones to cover, jet lag, things like that. Then you come back, sometimes very minimal recovery to club football. And this is where we are right now. This is where we are right now as I'm recording this, by the way, on Wednesday evening. The players are coming from wherever they have been on their international breaks and coming back to Paris. And then they have to be playing on a weekend again, no matter how things have been going. I mean, unless they are injured. In the summer, you might play the Euros, the Copa America, the Olympics or the World Cup, depending on the year. That's a lot of football. Last time the World Cup was even in the middle of the season in December, so that added to that workload that we're talking about. Some players also play Asian Cup or African Cup of Nations, which are during the season, but the return from those isn't always very easy. I remember this very well a couple of years ago when Senegal won the AFCON, African Cup of Nations, and we had a few players in that team, very key players actually for them, to be honest with you, in that campaign. Idrissa Gana Gueye and Abdou Diallo. Abdou Diallo wasn't much of a starter for PSG at the time, but he was there playing next to Koulibaly as a central defender for the AFCON winning side, Senegal, playing very well. I was watching, they were really brilliant, both of them, to be honest with you, but their return to club football was tough, and they really struggled to get back on their level. And of course, there can be other reasons as well, but these tournaments with national teams aren't just physically demanding, but they are also emotionally very draining. I think we quite often overlook that because it maybe matters surprisingly little whether the main emotion has been elation of triumph or crushing disappointment. The come down or the life after can almost be equally draining. For us, this was also quite clearly shown after the Qatar World Cup. There has never, that I can remember, been a season that has been so divided between the good part and the bad part. The autumn, when we were undefeated and the team played beautiful football, and during the spring we were limping towards the finish line, nearly losing the title in the last meters to the incredible, admittedly very, very good Lens team that perhaps even should have won it, but in the end I think we secured it by 1 point or something like that. Small margin, and our team was so depleted after the World Cup. It was not fun time to be a PSG supporter. It wasn't fun time to watch the matches. It was really pretty bad second half of that season. But then because of that, it was such a difficult experience to even watch PSG playing for that spring. We also forget how incredibly good PSG was in the autumn before that. And that is the thing. Essentially, if we keep adding these matches, what will happen is that they very unevenly will impact the best players because they tend to have the most matches to play, except the ones who don't. For instance, Erling Haaland hasn't been involved in the Euros or the World Cup. It's not his choice, of course, but nevertheless, he's benefited from some extra rest. But for the most part, many of the best players have played more matches. That tends to be the case. If you don't play in these European tournaments like Champions League, Europa League, Conference League, you don't have a deep domestic cup run, and perhaps you aren't even selected to any national team, whatever your country may be, then, well, you have much better situation to focus on your football because you will get some breaks and there in the mix, but that's not anybody's ambition usually. For the most part, people want to play as much as possible. So that's also one of the challenges. We are compromising the quality of the football we will see. I said I'm not keen on the Nations League. I find it uninteresting and unexciting. Yes, I had the other suggestion which I think could be better, but we need to also consider the total amount of football per player. How much can a body take? Football is very different to a lot of sports, professional sports that are played, especially, say, North America. Not taking anything away from those, of course, but in football you have to run 45 minutes pretty much without a break. You have a lot of sprints there. You can't take a breather twice that 45 minutes, and it's pretty tough on the body because it just keeps on continuing. There's no timeouts and there's not really water breaks or anything like that during the normal season. There's no ad breaks. Whatever you have, it's pretty tough. It's pretty tough going, and I think that it impacts the level that we're seeing, that we're enjoying if the players are just playing like a conveyor belt. And I'm not, by the way, attacking national team football. I really like national team football, and I understand that for many players who aren't as central in their club's hierarchy, it could be even their favorite thing. And I'm not saying that this is the case, but an argument could be made. It could easily be so that, for instance, our very own Randall Colomwani could be one of the players who's quite happy when the international break comes. He's clearly having maybe more defined role in the French national team than he is in Paris at the moment. I mean, he could be. His situation there seems stronger at the moment. And of course, the players want to play. Part of this issue is that the players just cannot say no. They just want to play. They will say in this kind of report, they will say that, it's too much football and we shouldn't play this much football. But they will never say that, hey, coach, why don't you keep me on the bench today? I need to relax a little bit. I need to recover in order to be in better shape for the next important match. That doesn't tend to happen. I mean, what do I know? I'm not there. I don't have any secret microphones in the locker room, but that doesn't seem to be the case. So this is something to consider. And the players, maybe they also need to say that, listen, I need some rest. And for instance, this summer has been a good example of this, how much the players like to play, because basically there were a lot of players who were saying that, I want to play in the Olympics. And of course, a lot of French players were especially saying because it was a home Olympics. And I fully understand that. And it would have been a lovely thing to have them there. But imagine having them playing Euros and then Olympics and then coming directly back into the club side and all of that. It's a lot. It's a lot and it's too much. So what is then to do about this? We're now just sort of dancing around an issue. We're just describing a problem, but do I have anything to propose as a solution? Well, this is what I think that could be the thing. I'm not saying this would be like solving all the problem, but I think this could be the general direction where we could find a little bit better way of doing it. I think we could have fewer international breaks, even if they sometimes had an extra match, even if they were a little bit longer, but fewer of them, so that the total amount of breaks and matches would be cut down. The traveling time and the air miles could be reduced. Also, I mean, there's also a strong environmental case to be made, because while we use paper straws and these multimillionaires are flying around like that is their job, it kind of raises some other questions, but that's not the point right now. We don't really need a mid-season international friendlies, in my opinion. Competition is another thing, but then sometimes you have these friendly matches also, and that just seems a bit unnecessary. Either way, I think there's a room to take a few of these matches away while still holding on to the essence of international football. What else? Well, I mean, the Club World Cup is a pretty awful idea, in my opinion. Well, I mean, there's something to be said about it, but I think it's just a little bit too much. It's too far out there. I think that the new Champions League format has its own definite upsides, but I'm not keen on these extra matches. It's just a few matches maybe, but I all of these matches, they add up. I mean, I love watching football, but I hate injuries, and watching these exhausted players isn't as much fun as watching them play when they're in full fitness. That certainly is my view about it. And of course, rotation becomes a key. Clubs like PSG can afford to have depth to make substitutions without losing at least a lot of quality. Of course, there might be some clubs that can make substitution with even less of a loss in quality, but smaller clubs, for them, that is going to be a little bit more difficult. It's a lot harder, to be honest with you. The business model seems to be so based on quantity of football, even if it came at the expense of the quality. That's not my preference. Ligue 1, of course, has a few matches fewer now than they had in some of the previous seasons, but the issue is that we might cut down on domestic football. Part of that was also not having Coupe de la Ligue anymore as we used to have it. There are always a bunch of other matches that come in and take the place of those matches, pushing the balance again into more football and not less. Even if you take few matches off from here and there, somehow you end up more football because somebody else is going to be greedy and push their agenda forward. But basically, when you think about this situation right now, so you have fewer domestic matches and more top-notch matches between the top European teams. This is essentially the idea of this new Champions League. It might be that the European Super League won, even if it didn't win yet, certainly not yet as an organization, but their plan has been adopted to some extent by UEFA. And who is to say what will happen in the next 5 to 10 years? This is what you call an international break topic, an important subject matter, of course, and one that I do feel quite passionate about, but difficult to know what to say or do about it in real world, what kind of solutions there could be. Should we, for instance, boycott the Club World Cup, which is coming next summer? I don't know to what extent we will play our best 11 in the middle of the next summer in this tournament, but also it's not that exciting on a level of an idea, this tournament. It feels to me more like one of those summer preseason tour tournaments that are not so serious. You just rotate a lot of players and it doesn't matter how you end, like do you win or do you not win. It's just a sort of friendly matches. So I don't know if that's going to be the approach. There was already news that Luis Enrique has been considering even the duration, which was admittedly very short of this preseason before this season as it started now earlier this summer, based on the fact that next summer there's not really going to be much of a break. So not sure how it will feel later on, this whole thing, considering how we are going to approach it as a club. But clearly it's just sort of a latest addition to what will contribute to a very real problem. And I don't mind the idea of it. This is the thing. This is the thing about it. The Club World Cup. I don't mind the idea of it, the concept, to be frank. If PSG will play against Mamelodi Sundowns, which isn't, by the way, my favorite South African team, I very much side with the Buccaneers, better known as Orlando Pirates. That is my team away from my actual team, PSG. South Africa being my former home country, I used to live for some years. So there's something to be said about me seeing PSG playing one of their teams, or playing against Flamengo, Fluminense from Brazil, or Boca Juniors, some team like that. I like things like that. I really think that's pretty cool, but the timing is so off and something has got to give. We can't just think that every cool idea should be implemented. We can't just add a nice idea on top of already too many competitions as they are. So this tournament will take place from 15th of June to 13th of July in 2025. So more or less 1 month from mid-June to mid-July. 1 month. Basically, there won't be time or opportunity before it to have meaningful break, especially if you want to be in form in this tournament. If you are taking it seriously, you can't really have much of a break before that. You pretty much have to continue from the previous season all the way to that. You can have maybe a few extra days off, but not a proper rest, not like a proper time to recover and just put your mind into something else. You will probably already start thinking about this tournament if you are taking it seriously. And then if you're not taking it seriously, is it worth going into that? That's another question. So this is the thing. There won't be enough time before the tournament, before mid-June, to have proper rest and recovery. And then when it ends mid-July, I guess it depends how far you go, but let's say that it goes almost to the mid-July, then we already should be in full steam working on our pre-season for the next season, with less than under a month for full season proper starting at that point. So when exactly will there be rest? And then the summer after, it's World Cup again. So it's like every year there's something happening. I remember the time 2020 when PSG was in the final 8 in Portugal of the Champions League, of course going all the way to the final that year. And I remember how it was different because it was in August, it was happening in August. And basically, I think that PSG's start of the season for the next season was even delayed because there were those matches that needed to be played in the Champions League. And Lyon had a very good run as well, so PSG was not the only French team at the time. But it really compromised the next season. It really compromised the season after that. The beginning of that was very difficult, and PSG was really struggling. That was, of course, a season that also we did not win the French league. That was the season, our 50th anniversary season that it was Lille who won that. But we had a very good, very respectable Champions League run. But that was not something that was clear from the beginning because it really didn't start very well that season. Rest is important, and when you are picking apart this whole rhythm, this whole system, the schedule, how it works, it becomes complicated. It's pretty relentless stuff, and the players also need to have rest. The reality is that the powers that be in football will want to add matches no matter what. They will just want to add matches as much as possible. But I think that that's okay. I think that you can add matches, but you just have to add them to the players who already have fewer matches. So basically, I don't think that you should drop a whole new schedule on a group of top teams, that the players who play every minute of every match more or less, but have another competition below Conference League in Europe, even two. What it would mean is that you don't have Bellingham or Musiala or players like that playing in these tournaments, in these competitions, but there are people who support these clubs because They are their local clubs and they'll be happy to have such an opportunity to play against other teams on their level. I think that there are a lot of teams that would be okay and happy to play European matches. And no, like I said, they won't have those superstars, but they might have future stars, and it might be something quite exciting and quite interesting. I mentioned before, I live here in Helsinki, Finland, and my local team, the team that is the Helsinki local team, this year they are going to be playing in Conference League, which will bring some teams here in my city playing matches before they've even played in Europa League group stage. I remember a couple of years ago, I took my son, we went to watch AS Roma, and Jose Mourinho was there at the time, and it was pretty cool. But I think that a lot of different cities and towns around Europe would like to have an opportunity to have these European competitions, even if they are not on such a high level. But this is not necessarily what the power structure wants, because maybe you don't make same kind of a TV rights or whatever. But people will support their clubs. This is the thing. So if you want to add more matches, more football matches, then why not do it that way? I think there's something to be said about that. And who knows? Perhaps even Marseille could have European football if you add a few levels below Conference League. PSG women have drawn Juventus for their Champions League qualification round. The winner after these two matches, one home and another one away, will go directly to the group stage then. Women will still have the old system this season in their Champions League, and next season they will join this new setup that the men's teams are already busy with. And of course, it is notable that PSG is ranked by UEFA as the fourth best team in Europe after Lyon, Barcelona and Chelsea, and France is on top of the coefficient with very large margin, but still only one team from France makes it directly to the Champions League group stage. It's a pretty harsh deal. Juventus is a reasonable team, a formidable opponent for sure, not only because they have already started their domestic season, unlike in France, so they will be a bit ahead of us in their preparation. And there are also a few familiar names on their side from our last season squad. Amalie Vangsgaard and Viola Galigares, and also from previous years, Estelle Gascarino is there. We, of course, also have their former player, Joe Execchini, who just came into PSG this summer. Last season, they finished second in Serie A Femminile, that is Juventus, quite a distance behind AS Roma, to be honest with you, who we did beat twice in the Champions League group stage, where they finished last. It was a group of death, of course it was, because PSG was there, but PSG did win that group. And like I said, AS Roma, who was ahead of almost 10 points, I think 9 points ahead of Juventus in Serie A Femminile in Italy, in the domestic league, was the last one of those. What does that mean? Not really anything, to be honest with you. It doesn't necessarily mean anything, because this is a new season, there's been a lot of new players and all that, and we've had many changes. I really trust our starting 11 very much, but the depth is an issue, and hopefully some late signings before we start will come the new season, because we will have to hit the ground running, as this week on Friday we will have the last friendly match, and then it's the match against Juventus, and it will be our first competitive match of the season. The first competitive match is going to be Champions League qualifier. It does not sound ideal. The domestic league starts only after that. The trip to Turin will be the next Wednesday then, and we really have to get good result there. The international break has been done now, and we are back to club football. PSG men play only their second match of the season at Parc des Princes. It's fourth match all in all, and that one is against Brest, which of course was last season's surprise team, and this autumn we will see them attacking Champions League even for the first time in their history, facing such teams as Real Madrid and Barcelona. In Ligue 1 this season, they have one win from 3 matches, so not a glorious beginning for the campaign, but from last year we know that they can surprise. No time to mock about is what I say. And after that, next week we play against Girona at Parc des Princes. Girona will play Barcelona a few days before our match in La Liga, where they are currently 5th with 7 points from 4 matches. That is 1 draw with Real Betis, defeated by Atletico, who won them, and then victories against Osasuna and Sevilla, which are also the most recent matches before the international break. So So there's always that cut in form. Of course, it can continue as it was, but we shall see how it's going to go, what kind of team we are going to be meeting when this match in Champions League is going to come. And I trust that Luis Enrique has a good plan for the Spanish sides, especially. I mean, I hope that he has a good plan for all teams, but especially the Spanish ones. Girona is part of the City Football Group, which owns just under half of it, but is still the biggest shareholder anyways. After them, we have an away match against Stade Reims. These 3 matches are all within 1 week from Saturday to Saturday. Technically 8 days. I'd like to hope that Enrique will make necessary choices with rotation, especially since our central defense is coming from across the ocean once again and some recovery might be needed. That's, by the way, something to consider. If you think about our central defenders, the best ones available are Marquinhos, William Pacho, and Beraldo, and they all have to travel that extra distance for their international breaks. Beraldo, of course, doesn't get much playing time at the moment with the national team, so he might be there to start, but after that, in the absence of Lucas Hernandez and Presnel Kimpembe, the fourth option really is Milan Skriniar, who doesn't seem to enjoy any sort of favoritism by Luis Enrique. I do think that we need him at the very least in rotation this season. No matter what you think about his abilities with the ball, he clearly is a solid defender, even if not a perfect one for our system. We know that, but we can't burn out our South Americans quite this early in the season, because need I remind you that Manuel Ugarte, who is no longer a player, last season he was really good until this long-haul international breaks with matches on high altitudes over there in South America. His downhill started from this exact thing. On a whole nother matter, we wish Warren Zaïre-Emery not just quick recovery from the knock he took with the national team, but also the best of luck as he's currently busy writing his written exams for his baccalaureate. It will also be good for him to have this part of his education behind him, and may the results be nothing short of excellent. Thank you so much for being with me for this moment we have shared, for listening to this episode of PSG Review. My name is Mikko. Find me online, share, rate, review, subscribe, and more than anything, listen. And if you hear this, you clearly are listening, and my gratitude to you for that is immense. It's not taken for granted. Take care. Until next time, peace.